To the outside world, America is still the land of opportunity. It is the gleaming skyline of Manhattan, the innovation engine of Silicon Valley, and the cultural superpower that gave the world everything from the iPhone to Netflix. When you walk through the streets of any major city, you are surrounded by Teslas and Whole Foods and people ordering $8 lattes on apps. The stock market hits record highs. GDP keeps climbing. From the surface, the West looks like the ultimate success story of modern capitalism. But if you look past the stock tickers and the Instagram feeds, you find something terrifying. You find a generation that will never own homes. You find infrastructure crumbling faster than it can be repaired. You find a workforce that is more productive than ever in history, yet poorer than their parents were at the same age. And most damningly, you find a social contract that has been quietly shredded while everyone was distracted by the illusion of growth. The mainstream media and standard economists will tell you that the West's problems are about politics. They will tell you it's about left versus right, about immigration policy, about culture wars. And while those debates are loud, they are a distraction. They are symptoms, not the disease. The Western decline is the result of a much deeper, much darker economic rot that started decades ago. The West isn't struggling because of foreign competition. The West is dying because of an economic suicide pact it signed in the 1980s, a pact to protect asset owners at the expense of workers, a pact to inflate GDP numbers while hollowing out the middle class. It is a story of generational theft, infrastructure decay, and a refusal to accept that you cannot financialize your way to prosperity. And the scariest part isn't that America is declining. It's that most people don't even realize it's happening because the metrics we use to measure success have been designed to hide it. Part 1, the generational heist. To understand why the West is dying, we have to understand the greatest wealth transfer in human history. And no, I'm not talking about billionaires. I'm talking about your parents. I'm talking about the baby boomers. In the 1980s, an average worker could buy a home on a single income. A teacher, a factory worker, a middle manager could put 20% down and own a piece of America. Housing was a durable good, something you lived in, something that slowly appreciated, while you raised a family and built equity. But somewhere along the way, housing stopped being shelter. It became a financial asset. It became a speculation vehicle. It became the retirement plan for an entire generation. And that transformation created a new feudalism. Here are the numbers. Let them sink in. Baby boomers, despite being only 20% of the American population, control 41% of all real estate wealth. That's $19 trillion in housing. Millennials, who are now in their prime family-forming years and make up a larger share of the population, own just 21%. In 1991, when boomers were the same age millennials are now, they controlled a far larger share of housing relative to their population. This isn't a market. This is a hostage situation. And here's the mechanism that makes it permanent. When the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates to zero during COVID, millions of boomers refinanced their mortgages at 2.5%, 3%, sometimes below. They locked in payments that will never go up. Then rates exploded to 7%. Now do the math. A boomer sitting in a 4-bedroom house they bought for $200,000 in 1995 has a $1,200 monthly payment. If they sell and downsize to a smaller home at today's prices and rates, their payment doubles, so they don't move. This is the lock-in effect. Researchers found it reduced housing mobility by 16% in just 2 years. The market is frozen, not because people don't want to buy, but because the people who own won't sell. There are 21 million empty nest households in America. Homes with 2 or more spare bedrooms occupied by 1 or 2 retirees. In cities like Pittsburgh and Buffalo, nearly a quarter of all housing stock is empty nesters rattling around in family-sized homes, while young families are crammed into overpriced rentals. Surveys show 78% of Americans over 60 plan to die in their current homes. They are not downsizing. They are not releasing inventory. They are aging in place, while an entire generation waits. This is the first pillar of the Western suicide. The transformation of housing from shelter into an asset class that the young must rent from the old. By protecting boomer equity, we created a landed aristocracy. We didn't mean to, we just followed the incentives, and the incentives said protect asset prices at all costs. Part 2, the GDP illusion. But how do you keep an economy looking healthy when the middle class is being hollowed out? You need a trick. You need a way to make the numbers go up even as the lived reality goes down. Enter the population Ponzi. The Western approach to immigration shifted in the 21st century. It stopped being about importing talent. It became about importing GDP. More people means more consumption. More consumption means higher aggregate output. The economy grows even if nobody's actually getting richer. Canada is patient zero for this model. In recent years, Canada welcomed over 500,000 permanent residents annually, plus nearly 1 million temporary residents. The aggregate GDP rose. Politicians declared success. But per capita GDP collapsed. Productivity stagnated. And here's the mechanism that explains why. Economic theory is simple on this point. If you add labor faster than you add capital, machinery, infrastructure, housing, the amount of capital per worker falls. This is called capital dilution. It means lower productivity, it means stagnant wages, it means more people competing for the same inadequate housing stock. Rather than investing in automation to increase efficiency, Canadian businesses relied on cheap imported labor. Why build a robot when you can hire 3 people for the same cost? The incentive to innovate disappeared. The result? Housing vacancy rates hit historic lows. Rents hit historic highs. The social contract broke. The state invited millions of people without building the hospitals, the schools, or the apartments to house them. In the United States, the fiscal math is equally brutal. Immigrants without college degrees typically receive more in government benefits than they contribute in taxes. This is not an opinion. This is accounting. The surge in migration has forced school districts in gateway cities to request billions in emergency funding. Emergency rooms, legally required to treat anyone who walks through the door, are drowning in uncompensated care. The politicians get to claim GDP growth. The citizens get to pay for the infrastructure that doesn't exist. This is the second pillar, the illusion that aggregate growth equals prosperity. You can make the economy bigger while making the average person poorer, and that is exactly what is happening. Part 3, the productivity theft. Now let's talk about the lie at the heart of modern capitalism. You were told that if you work hard, you will get ahead, that productivity and compensation move together, that rising tides lift all boats. Here's the reality. Since the 1970s, American productivity has grown by 74%. Workers are producing nearly twice as much value per hour as they did 50 years ago. But hourly compensation for typical workers has risen just 9% in real terms over that same period. Let that sink in. You are 74% more productive. You are 9% richer. Where did the other 65% go? It went to capital, it went to shareholders, it went to asset owners. The rewards of technological progress, of efficiency, of your labor have been systematically redirected from the people who do the work to the people who own the stocks. The Consumer Price Index tells you inflation is under control, but the CPI is designed to measure survival, not living standards. It assumes you'll switch from steak to hamburger when prices rise. It assumes you don't actually need to own a home, you can just rent forever. It assumes that a smaller TV that costs the same as a bigger one 10 years ago means your standard of living improved. When you measure wages against the things that actually matter, housing, healthcare, education, the picture is apocalyptic. Housing prices have tripled in real terms since 1980. Healthcare costs have quadrupled. College tuition has increased 1,200%. The middle class is no longer an economic status. It is a debt management strategy. You maintain the appearance of prosperity by borrowing against a future that gets worse every year. In the UK, median incomes grew just 6% over 13 years. That is stagnation without historical precedent in the modern era. This is the third pillar, the severing of work from reward. You can labor your entire life and never build wealth because the system is designed to transfer value from labor to capital, from young to old, from workers to owners. Part 4, the infrastructure collapse. A civilization in ascent builds. A civilization in decline patches. The West is patching. Let me tell you about Thames Water. Thames Water supplies 15 million people in London and southeast England. It is the largest water utility in the UK, and it is collapsing. The company accumulated over £15 billion in debt, not to build new reservoirs, not to replace aging pipes, but to pay dividends to shareholders. The actual physical system was stripped for parts. Profits were extracted, maintenance was deferred. The result, millions of liters lost to leaks every day, sewage discharged into rivers, and now, bankruptcy. The bill for decades of asset stripping is being passed to consumers in the form of massive rate hikes. This is not an aberration. This is the model. Privatize a natural monopoly. Extract value through financial engineering. Let the physical plant decay. When it collapses, make the public pay to fix it. In America, the crisis is playing out in real time. The electrical grids of major regions are failing. New England faces chronic winter energy security risks because it blocked pipeline construction and now depends on imported liquefied natural gas, competing with Europe and Asia for the same cargoes. California imports electricity from neighboring states when the sun goes down, paying the highest rates in the nation. Grid operators consistently warn of potential blackouts. In Texas, despite its energy dominance, the state faces a different limit: water. The population boom in the Texas Triangle, Dallas, Houston, Austin, is colliding with drought and infrastructure that loses billions of gallons to leaks. Water, not land, may be the hard limit on growth. This is the fourth pillar. infrastructure entropy. The physical systems that make civilization possible are decaying because we chose financial returns over functional maintenance. We are living off the capital built by previous generations without replacing it. Part 5, The Great Partition. So where does this end? Is America doomed to follow Japan into 3 lost decades? Not exactly, because something else is happening, something that most people haven't noticed yet. America is partitioning. It is splitting into 2 economies. One is dying, the other is being born. Look at the U-Haul data. Every year, the moving truck company publishes which states people are fleeing and which they're moving to. The results are consistent. California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, net outflow. Texas, Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, net inflow. This isn't politics. This is survival. People are voting with their feet. They are leaving states with high taxes and broken housing markets for states where the math still works. But the real story is deeper than migration. It's about who is building what and where. While the Northeast deindustrializes and California chases tech unicorns, the American South is experiencing the largest industrial investment wave since World War II. They call it the Battery Belt, a corridor running from Michigan through Kentucky, Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Since 2018, over $428 billion in clean energy and manufacturing investments have flowed into the South. Georgia alone has secured Hyundai's $7.6 billion EV plant and SK Battery's $2.6 billion expansion. Kentucky got the Ford Ace K Blue Oval Battery Park, $5.8 billion, creating 5,000 jobs. North Carolina landed Toyota's $13.9 billion battery plant, one of the largest industrial investments in American history. These factories are not speculation. They are physical capital. Machines bolted to the floor, supply chains clustering around them. Jobs that cannot be outsourced. Why the South? 3 reasons. Energy costs are lower, labor markets are flexible, and permits actually get approved. In California, building a factory requires navigating environmental review for years. In Georgia, ground breaks in months. Capital flows to where it is treated best. Texas is the fortress of this new economy. The state produces 43% of America's crude oil and 28% of its natural gas. It leads the nation in wind power generation. It has its own electrical grid. In a world of energy instability, Texas is a sovereign entity. This is the partition. The coastal economies that financialized everything are stagnating. The interior economies that still build things are growing. The winners and losers of the next 30 years are being sorted right now. Part 6, the exit strategy. But what if even the winning regions aren't enough? What if the entire Western model, the debt, the demographics, the declining social cohesion, is past the point of reform? For a growing number of people, the answer is simple: leave. Look at Poland. In 1990, it was impoverished, recovering from communism. Today, the IMF projects that by 2030, Poland's GDP per capita will surpass the United Kingdom and Japan. Let that sink in. A country that was third world in living memory will soon be richer per person than 2 of the G7 nations. Poland offers European culture without Western European dysfunction. Low crime, high social cohesion, functional infrastructure, a government that builds things instead of regulating them into oblivion. Or look at Vietnam. As capital flees China due to geopolitical risk, Vietnam is becoming the new factory of the world. Samsung, Apple suppliers, global manufacturing is flooding in. The country has a demographic dividend, young workers eager to earn and consume. Unlike the geriatric West, Vietnam's growth is organic. For Americans specifically, the escape valves are closer. Mexico now hosts over 1.6 million American expats, not retirees hiding in beach towns. Entrepreneurs, remote workers, and families who discovered that their American salary buys a life in Mexico City that is impossible in Austin or Miami. Panama uses the US dollar, has no income tax on foreign earnings, and offers easy residency. They call it the Singapore of the Americas. A financial haven with modern infrastructure and rule of law. These are not fantasies. These are documented migration patterns. The same professional class that once would have moved from Ohio to California is now moving from California to Lisbon, from New York to Dubai, from the collapsing core to the rising periphery. Conclusion, the mirror. But we shouldn't look at this with judgment. We should look with horror. Because if you think this is about other people making bad choices, you're missing the point. The West built a system designed to deliver one thing above all else: stability, stable asset prices, stable employment for insiders, stable retirements for the generation that locked in their gains before the door closed. And they got it. The system worked perfectly for them. But the price of stability was vitality. The economic dynamism that built the West was sedated. The creative destruction that clears dead wood and creates opportunity was prevented. The zombie companies survived. The housing market froze. The productivity gains flowed to owners. Japan showed us that you can defy economic gravity for 30 years if you're willing to sacrifice the future. The West is running the same experiment with a different flavor. The debt numbers look more like Tokyo every year. The demographics curve the same way. The young are locked out of assets the same way. The social contract is breaking the same way. Japan isn't an anomaly. Japan was the warning. They are just 20 years ahead on the timeline. The story of the West proves that you cannot financialize your way out of structural decline. You cannot inflate asset prices forever without destroying mobility. You cannot import population to fake GDP growth without diluting prosperity. You cannot defer maintenance on civilization without eventually facing the bill. The West tried to build a system where asset owners never had to lose, and in doing so, they ensured that workers could never truly win. The standard of living isn't declining because of bad luck. It is declining by design, by policy, by the accumulated choices of 40 years of protecting the past at the expense of the future. The partition is already happening. Some regions are escaping. Some people are leaving. The smart money sees what's coming and is repositioning. The question isn't whether the decline is real. The question is whether you're on the right side of the partition. Because when you look at the housing prices you can't afford, the wages that don't match your productivity, the infrastructure crumbling around you, and the debt that can never be repaid, you're not looking at a temporary problem. You're looking at a system that has chosen, slowly and politely, to stop working for you. And in the brutal logic of economics, a system that stops working for the majority is a system that eventually stops working for everyone. The lost decades aren't just Japanese history anymore. They're the West's present. And for most people, they're about to become the future. The only question left is, what are you going to do about it?